Hello and welcome, everyone. We are live for what promises to be an exciting conversation where we're going to be busting some myths about online education, the power of online education, challenges we aim to solve, and the lasting benefits students gain. I'd like to welcome my guest, Alyssa Tormala, the head of school for Laurel Springs School, an online K-12 school that has provided high-quality private education for over 30 years. Alyssa has served as a teacher, an instructional coach, a school leader in private education for almost 20 years. She's an educational innovator who seeks to empower young people to pursue their passions and find success and joy in our ever-changing world. Welcome so much, Alyssa.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this chat today.
I'm so thrilled you're here, and I'm excited to pick up on the conversations that we've started online via LinkedIn and other channels that we have been talking about for quite some time as we've been getting to know each other. And I've been learning more and more about the work that you do at Laurel Springs. So I'm excited to have this opportunity to have a chat with you online, which is very fitting for us to discuss the power of online education. And let's go ahead and bust some myths, yeah?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, great. Before we do, and before we get into it, I'd like to also welcome our live audience, as well as the audience who will be joining us after the fact via recording, because that's the great thing about online. We can have our synchronous and asynchronous conversation. So welcome, everyone. And we would love it, Alyssa and I, if you would put your location in the chat if you feel so inclined to do. Where are you logging in from today? Where in the world? I know that Marilyn is here from Canada, and thanks so much for starting our chat off strong, Marilyn, and welcome to you. So please go ahead and put in the chat where you are coming from. To that end, I'd also invite you to pop your questions, your comments in the chat as well. If you have a comment for Alyssa or for myself, please put it in the chat. If you have a question for Alyssa, love to invite you to put it in the Q&A section on the right-hand side of your screen with the little question mark. Please put that question in there, and we will be getting to as many questions as possible towards the end of our conversation. Perfect. But I've got a lot of questions to start us off with, Alyssa. So if I can just jump right in.
Go for it. Yes.
Okay. So describe to us, please, the perfect candidate. And I don't know if there ever is a perfect candidate for anything, but if you could talk about who that candidate is or who they are for online education in just 3 words, what would they be and why?
That's tough because you're right. It is, there's a variety of options out there. So just 3 words. I would say, number 1, I would say independent. Number 2, I would say passionate. And number 3, I would say dedicated.
Okay. Independent, passionate, and dedicated. The success for an online student. Okay. So why those 3 words? There are lots of words that you could have chosen to describe your students, both current and prospective, and alum. Why those 3, Alyssa?
Those 3 because in part they reflect what the student brings to the learning experience, and I would say that's one of the number 1 components of being successful in online learning. I would say it's true in any kind of learning, of course, but in the online space, having that ability to be an independent learner, an independent doer, an independent thinker, these are things that really benefit you in this space where you have a lot more flexibility. So being able to set your own schedule, being able to manage multiple different passions and pursuits that you might have going on in your life, that sense of independence and ownership of your learning is a key component to being successful in online learning. The second word I used was passionate. And I use that because so many of our students come to us specifically because they have some passion in their lives that they're pursuing. And they're looking for a learning experience that comes in alignment with that. So this might be a student who is a college-bound athlete and very dedicated to their training. And they want to spend a lot of time every day being able to train and work out with other athletes, work with their coaches, go to competitions. That can really get in the way of a 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 kind of learning experience. So they're passionate. They bring that passion into not only what they do on their day-to-day basis, but into their learning. And that really benefits them. And then I would say dedicated, because students who come into online learning, again, are also dedicated to wanting to do more, wanting to have an expanded experience in their lives and think a little outside the box. So learning for them might look like laying on their bed for a couple hours and then going and doing something else and then coming back and sitting at the kitchen table. It might look like learning on a plane when they're traveling back and forth from competitions. It might look like the flexibility of having to move from place to place if they're with a family that is a military family and they're needing to relocate. But being dedicated to making sure learning is still a part of that package, that's an important component of success as well.
As I often do, Alyssa, I'm going off script here. I prepared a list of questions for you, but you've said something that makes me curious about, that also falls in line with myth busting. And one of the myths that I hear about online education is that questions about community. You've mentioned a couple of different groups of students who would be great candidates, are great candidates for Laurel Springs. But like, let's take the athletes, for example. Some people may question, like, well, what kind of community do they have? I've got the student who wakes up, they've got to be on the ice at, all hours of the morning. And so this really works for our schedule. Talk to me about the type of community that they have, not just with other athletes at Laurel Spring, but in the Laurel Spring community in general.
I love that you asked that question, because it's one of the biggest myths that we often hear. Families will often ask us, will my student be isolated and alone if they're doing online learning, because they are technically doing their learning through a computer screen and in communication with their teachers. But the answer to that question is definitively no. A student can absolutely have community when they're doing online learning. That sense of independence comes into it, though. They have to make sure that they're putting themselves into that space to take advantage of the opportunities to build community. So if they're a tennis player or an athlete or a performing artist, they're obviously going to have a sense of community outside of Laurel Springs with the group of people that they're working with, right? That's an obvious choice. But within Laurel Springs, we also, and this is another myth people have, that you can't have community in an online school, and that's totally untrue. We have so many clubs and activities. It's over 65 at this point and growing. We have 10 different honor societies. We have everything from the crocheting and knitting club that just barely started recently, and the AI club that just started recently, to clubs that focus on world languages or focus on competitions that a student might want to be a part of, like Model United Nations or Future City, which is an engineering competition. So there are lots and lots of opportunities for students to build community with other students who enjoy the same passions and pursuits by engaging in these community events. And they can be virtual or they can be in person, and we offer both. One of the things that we've really loved about what we've been doing over the last couple of years is increasing our in-person opportunities for students as well. So in addition to monthly field trips that we offer in various different locations around the country, so families can travel and enjoy traveling and have a field trip together, we also have informal meet and greets. We have a whole bunch of recesses that happen periodically throughout the year. We kicked off this year with back to school picnics that many of our parent representatives hosted, or our faculty who lived in different parts of the country hosted in their local area and just invited families to come engage with each other. So community is absolutely a part of the program. But I would say one of the things that can make a student successful in online learning is that they step into that, they lean into that, they find their space. And honestly, I would say that's probably true in any kind of educational experience. My experience in brick and mortar private schools is exactly the same. Students who didn't lean in to something that they were passionate about or enjoyed had a hard time making friends and building a sense of community. The same thing is absolutely true in online learning.
So how do you encourage and foster that sense of belonging? If you might have a student who is a bit shy or reticent to engage in these communities, how do you encourage them? What are some tips and tricks you can give us to get them to take that first step and join that knitting club, or go to that online, go to that meet and greet in person and what have you?
Great question. So another component I think that takes an online learning program to a next level is having adults who are paying attention to what's going on with kids and working in partnership with the families who are obviously seeing everything from their perspective as well. So our teachers and our counselors really work hard to get to know the children that they are working with and find out about what they're interested in, engage with them about passions or things that might come up in their assignments, for example. And then they will share forward, hey, it seems like you're interested in AI. Did you know there's an AI club? Hey, it looks like you live in the Dallas area. We're having a field trip there pretty soon. Are you going to go? Hey, I'm going to be at the year-end celebration as your teacher. I'd love if your family were able to join us there. Do you want to come? So it's that sense of inviting them into the community if they are perhaps a little bit reluctant to, or if maybe they don't know what the options are. And the longer they're with us, the more opportunities they have to know, because we obviously share this information out, right, in newsletters and emails and through our learning management system. They have lots of access to what the opportunities are.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So let's talk about that end result, that student success that you mentioned out of the gate. So can you give me some examples, maybe some memorable stories that speak to the transformational experiences students have in your school?
Of course, yeah. And I could give you so many stories that reflect lots of different types of kids, right? But the one that comes to mind right off the bat is a student we have who is currently 16 years old and is graduating from high school this year. And he joined Laurel Springs as an online learner back when he was in the K through 5 grade levels. And his main reason for joining is he's a student who he loves learning. He's passionate about it. He moves faster than most of his fellow students and was finding it very difficult to be in a brick and mortar environment where he was held to the pace of the classes that he was in. And in online learning, he's been able to accelerate. He's been able to go a little faster in the areas that he's most passionate about. He's been able to take extra classes. And now he's able to graduate a little early and already move on to the next stage of his life journey. And he's so passionate about it. He comes to our virtual open houses and shares this story. He really, really loves that he had the chance to do this. And I think about that for all the students out there who are like him, who want to go faster, who want to excel, and they get bored and they start to act out or they start to have challenges because they don't have the opportunity that this young man had as part of our system. I would say another example of a great success story are a student who just graduated last year, actually, and joined online learning. She was an international student. And one of the reasons she joined online learning is she had a passion for building her own business. So while she was in school with us, she actually started her own cosmetics business online. And that's what she's doing. So she graduated already with a business in place and moving forward in that field that she was super passionate and excited about. So having the flexibility and the support in that online environment helped both of those students be able to chart their own journeys, really.
Those are excellent examples. And it makes me think of another myth that I hear a lot, in that is about, it's in a box and it's cut and dry. Mm-hmm. You just spoke to areas of innovation, entrepreneurship, mm-hmm. and individualization in just those two examples. And I know that you have hundreds and thousands more that you could share. Mm-hmm. I want to focus on that individualization that you mentioned, mm-hmm. when you talked about the first student who, was working at a certain pace. Talk to me about what that looks like at LSS.
Great question. So for our system, and this is important to notice that, every online school and every online program may be of a slightly different model, right? So, and that's neither good nor bad. That is just the way that various different programs have set up their models. Mm-hmm. And we encourage families to make sure they're doing their research to ensure that the model they're choosing is the right one for their student. But for Laurel Springs, the model we use is a fully independent model. We use the word asynchronous in the education world, of course. Mm-hmm. But what that means is that everything a student needs to learn a content or a skill is contained inside their course on the learning management system. So that allows them to then go at their own pace with the learning and do that at any time of day from any location, as long as they have access to a computer and the internet. For students who want to accelerate or who are really excited about a particular subject, that allows them to spend however much time in whatever structure makes the most sense to them. So for this particular student I was sharing about, he loves math. It's one of his favorite things. And he was really accelerating in that. And that our system allowed him to get into a math course, go faster through that math course, have lots of support and feedback from his teachers, finish that course, and then move on to the next course a lot faster, which allowed him then to accelerate his process and graduate early. It's not the graduating early so much that was the huge success there. It was the fact that he got to learn the things he wanted to learn at the pace that was right for him, and he still loves school as a result. And that is the benefit of a system like ours. Rolling enrollment, you can start any time of the year. You can get into your courses and move through them in a shorter or longer time frame, depending on the access that you get. And then the students get to benefit by being lifelong learners and enjoying what they're doing.
Excellent examples, and all speak to that word success again, that you're out of the gate with that word success. With any transition for students and families alike, there are going to be challenges, and that's a big leap for some families, for many families, to make from going to a brick and mortar school to engaging in online learning. And so what are some of those challenges that students and families may face, both expected and the unexpected? And I'm most interested in the unexpected pieces, but let's bust the myths around the expected challenges. But also, can you highlight any unexpected ones that families who may be on with us today or watching this in the future might want to think about? And then most importantly, how do you navigate them?
Great question. So I think one of the most, I guess, obvious, but also it turns into an unexpected transitional challenge, is the fact that, in an online learning environment like ours that is fully independent, there is not a schedule to follow. So it's very easy if you've been used to a school schedule that says you go to school every day, Monday through Friday, you show up at school at 8 o'clock and you leave at 4 o'clock, and your day is very segmented and very organized by the class schedule that you're in. It's a big mindset shift to move to a model where you're the one who gets to be in charge of that. And I think for families, especially with students who might be on the younger ages, the K through 8 level, they really have to be a part of setting up the schedule for their students and setting up the learning environment for their students to ensure that their students are able to function well at home. That means that the families are taking on a lot more ownership of that than they might if they were in a brick and mortar environment where they're like, all right, go to school. School is taking care of all of that.
Right.
So I think people know that when they walk into it, but actually experiencing that can feel like an unexpected transitional challenge. And it does take a little bit of trial and error. So that is what our advisors and our counselors and our teachers are standing by for. They know how it works. They've seen it over and over again. They know what works for certain types of learners and certain types of families. And so they can offer support right off the bat for saying, hey, why don't you try this schedule? Or why don't you try this strategy to help your student? Let's see how it works. And then we'll adjust going forward. So the schedule thing is an expected challenge. But I think the unexpected piece of that is families are sometimes taken by surprise at how much ownership they need to have to support the student in their learning, especially for the younger students. That's a big benefit, though. It's a huge benefit because
Tell me
families
why.
actually get to know what's happening with their student, right? They get to see what their students are learning. They get to participate in the conversations. They get to have that coaching level support system at home where they are much more involved in how their students' educational experience is progressing. And the families who really lean into that and step into it find that it benefits relationship. It really benefits their kids to have that kind of interaction going on at home. It can be a really beautiful thing when it works out for that family. So, but getting there, that transitional piece can sometimes be a little bit challenging.
Okay, so you and I are educators by trade. What about the parents who that's not their thing? That's not where they come from, and they may need a little extra support, especially at that those key transitional phases, and that would come at first transition. Or maybe you started at a brick and mortar school, and now you're transitioning over to LSS. What support are available for all parents, but especially for those who education is not their trade like us?
Exactly. So it's not that they have to be the teachers of the subjects. I do want to make that clear. Like I said,
Sure.
the content is all in the course, and
Yeah.
the students get assigned an expert teacher for each of their courses. So the teacher is the one who can help the student with academic work, who can help them understand the concept. They're providing personalized feedback. They're engaging with the student. They offer office hours every day and appointments every day, so the student can lean into that or lean out of it as much as the student may need. And a parent at home, then I would encourage them to say, oh, hey, have you met with your teacher? Have you gone and talked to your teacher? Have you engaged in office hours? If you're struggling and frustrated, how are you helping yourself? Are you talking to your counselor? We also have a great partnership with tutor.com, which is a live tutoring service that offers live tutoring 24/7. So although obviously we want our teachers to be the primary supports for our students on academics, if they're doing their homework at midnight, which a lot of teenagers do. I have one, so I know this. And the teacher is sleeping, right? Then they can still hop online and get some support from a tutor right away. So they have the opportunity to have these supports in place. But again, it's that independence, right? It's the student being willing to lean into that space, the family being willing to help coach the student into leaning into that space. And that's really where some of the sort of unexpected transitional piece can come from. We do also have families that if they're working families, or they may have multiple families who all live in the same area, they may choose to bring in a family member or a coach of some kind, like a learning coach or a tutor that can help support the student on a day-to-day basis at home. And so some families do choose that route, and then they have that extra support. But we do provide those systems in place for the student to lean into. I want to say, I encourage, this is across the board, and I really hope that parents hold on to this. I did some research a number of years ago with a prior school on what helps students when they transition into college. And all of the professors I talked to during that research said over and over again, it was the major theme. If students don't come to office hours, if they don't build relationship with their professors, they are more likely to struggle in their college classes than the students who do come to office hours and build relationship and get help when they need it. And I've held on to that. That was a real revelation for me in that research. And when we're in this online space, that's one thing I share with parents regularly is whether your student is going into college or they're going into a career, building that skill of being able to say, I need some help. I have a question. I want a little bit of extra support. I'm going to reach out and talk to my teacher. I'm going to show up in their office hours. I'm going to ask that question. I'm going to set an appointment so that they can walk me through this concept I don't quite get. Because when they build that skill, it means whatever they do outside of high school, they're going to be more successful at, and they're going to be more comfortable with.
Well, I appreciate you sharing those pieces. And again, we're parents, we're educators, but lots of folks getting into this for the first time, or exploring these opportunities, have a misperception or myth of equating online learning with pandemic style emergency learning, and really want to impress upon prospective students and parents who may be watching, apples and oranges, completely different. And so let's bust that myth right away, shall we? That Absolutely. We're not talking about the same animal here.
Agreed. And I lived through that. I was in a brick and mortar school at that point. So I know exactly the difference between what we were calling emergency online learning or emergency digital learning at the time versus a robust online education platform like what we offer at Laurel Springs. The two only share in common that they're online. They're completely different in how they're set up and what their goal and purpose is. So in that sort of COVID land space, you had teachers who were scrambling to try to translate the content and the lessons and the experiences that they had created for a classroom environment into something that could be shared digitally to students, whether it was through a learning management platform or, say, Zoom calls or video conferencing. It was, successful to some level in that it kept students moving forward. And depending on the school you were in and the supports those teachers had, it could be even more successful in keeping students on pace, right? But an online learning experience like what we offer at Laurel Springs or in any of the other online schools that are out there is designed from the ground up. the content in the courses is designed for students to be able to learn that material as they go. So it contains readings and videos and interactive experiences. It has practice questions and practice quizzes that rotate so that every time a student retakes them, they get something new so that they're mastering the skill. It has, paper assignments and writing assignments and even science labs. That's another myth that sometimes people have, is that you can't do a science lab online. Oh, yes, you can, and we do. But it's all designed, from that concept of being able to give the student that flexible learning environment at home. It's a vastly different kind of experience than what happened during COVID.
Thanks so much for highlighting that with specificity of why that is one of, probably now in the past 5 years, one of the biggest myths.
Correct.
Now let's talk about future forward question. There's a question from the audience. How do you see the future of online education evolving, especially as technology continues to advance, AI, VR, etc.? Great question from Paloma. Thanks, Paloma.
I love it. And that is one of the big questions we often get. One of the things I love about being in an online space is that we are already heavily embedded in the technology movements, and we are already thinking innovatively as we move forward. So as we design or purchase or obtain content for our courses, we're looking for content that is taking advantage of the most recent technological advances, that's taking advantage of, say, interactive learning tools, and to some extent AI, as it continues to develop into a tool that can be used for designing and developing content. We're very careful about that, though, and I want to make that very, very clear to families out there. It's not the right thing to just jump into the newest technology. We want to be deliberate and thoughtful. We want to test it out. We want to pilot it. We want to make sure that we are thinking about the ethical obligations and the ethical implications of it at all levels before we actually implement it. So in an online environment where we're building courses that a student will be in over the course of the year, we want to make sure we're being very deliberate in building and designing those courses to take advantage of technology, but to actually do it in the right way, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think that you may have answered Paul's question as well in the chat, but I'm going to shout it out. Thanks, Paul, for your comments and question. But just to make sure that it's fully answered, how do you think schools can ensure that digital education remains flexible and adaptable to future technological advances or shifts in curriculum? So that seems to be the big question of the day.
Absolutely. And I think the short answer to that is we have to know what's out there and we have to be on top of it. We have to have faculty and staff who are excited and passionate about not just learning science. And there's always new research that's coming out about learning science itself and psychological, cognitive research about how people actually function with information. And that is in fact changing because of technology and the way that it affects how we think and how we learn information. But it's also in knowing, hey, we're trying to solve a problem. We want students to have a better experience in a component of a curriculum or in an instructional opportunity. We're trying to solve a problem. How can technology perhaps help us find a solution? And we need the right people who are asking the right questions and are passionate about it. So that is something I look for specifically as a head of school when we're looking for hiring somebody new, whether it's a faculty member or a counselor or a staff member. We're looking for someone who's not just understanding the context of what we do now, but it is excited about asking the right questions, doing the research, bringing creative solutions to the table. Because when we as a staff are doing that, we're ensuring that our students have the best opportunity to do that through the experiences we provide for them. And we've seen a huge amount of progress in that over the last few years as more technologies and opportunities have come available.
Yeah, great question. Thank you both, Paloma and Paul, for that. And Alyssa, as always, when we chat, it's never long enough and it's always too short. And I have a whole list of questions that I didn't get to, but fortunately, I can ask them to you at any time. But not just me. Other folks who are either watching here with us now, will watch this later, can feel free to reach out to you. Yes?
Absolutely. We would love it. The more that we can share information forward, the better. And for those who are specifically interested in Laurel Springs, I know we have that little green button at the bottom there, but I wanted to call out that we do have one of our virtual open houses happening tomorrow. So if you go to that button, you can hop on either the one for tomorrow, or we offer them at least twice a month. And it's a great opportunity to get a fuller picture about what Laurel Springs is, where we started, where we're going, and lots of people involved who you can ask questions of: teachers, staff members, counselors. We bring them all because we want to make sure that you have the best opportunity to learn about who we are.
That's fantastic. And I can actually personally attest to that because I was fortunate enough to attend a virtual LSS event last week, and it was outstanding. I learned so much, felt that sense of community with others who were in that virtual room with me, and I so appreciate that opportunity. So highly recommend that you check out this green link below, register to attend this virtual open house, or reach out to Alyssa or to her team at Laurel Spring. Thank you so much, Alyssa, for this great conversation. Looking forward to many more.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody. I can't wait to continue the conversation as we go forward.